Hello, everyone. You're welcome again to another episode of the Green Living Chats podcast. This particular episode is quite unique because it is part of our New Paradigms of Education program, where we are exploring different ways of tackling our educational process and critical thinking. This particular episode is part of a series of conversations that I had with Isak Stoddard, who is a PhD student in Sweden, and he wrote a very interesting paper. And I felt that what we could do was to dive into this paper, look at what it does, and then also look at how the thought processes came together to come up with this paper.
More than 30 years after the publication of the first IPCC report and the beginning of the international negotiations and all sorts of a swathe of different kinds of climate action, we still see that emissions are more than 60% higher today than they were in 1990. And we've also emitted more fossil carbon over just these 3 decades than previously throughout history. Of course, that has been very unequally distributed across the globe and between countries and between people as well.
Now, this particular paper is quite unique because it's a huge review paper with 23 co-authors. We have authors from different kinds of disciplines coming together to deliberate on one particular topic, which of course is global warming, a very important topic. And they look into this topic of 3 decades of trying to deal with the global warming crisis or carbon emissions and why we haven't bent the curve. And so in exploring this topic, they cover it from 9 different lenses. And I find it absolutely remarkable that Isak and his co-authors were able to come together to do this truly remarkable work. So in the first part, we discover how this paper came about and what went through the paper's conception and the processes that led to its eventual publication. And we also go a bit off record to talk about the review process, and I hope that you learned something from it. I learned a lot from it as we shared our experiences. So let's know what you think about it, and let's know whether we should do more of this from your feedback. But after this particular part, which is the first part, we're going to dive into the paper in the other parts as well. But we have decided not to make it part of the whole recording so that we can take our time to deal with the different topics, because it's a huge paper and it needs a lot of time and thinking to fully grasp the concept of the paper. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Isak, and I know that you're going to learn so much from him as I did. Here we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, all of you listening from all around the world. It's another episode here on the Green Living Chats podcast. And today we have Isak Stoddard, and he is about to blow our minds up. I came across a paper of his and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to find a way to talk with him and also to get all of you to be listening to him, because if you loved Origins Climate Finance, you are definitely going to love this as well. And we're going to talk about some pretty controversial topics, but I hope that you enjoy listening and that you learn a lot from it. And okay, so here we go. Isak, you are very, very welcome to the Green Living Chats podcast. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So we are just going to go straight to our conversation. I want us to first get to know you. Who is Isak Stoddard? What kind of journey has brought you to this point? So please tell us about yourself and how you have come to be here and to become such an active voice in the area of climate change and global warming.
Well, thanks, Daniel, and thanks also for increasing the listeners' expectations of what we'll go through here today. I hope that I won't disappoint you. It's really nice to be invited to your podcast. I've been listening to a few of the earlier episodes, and it's It's a great thing you're doing. How to introduce myself? I guess I find it a bit curious that I'm an active voice within the climate change, global warming discussions. But in some sense, I guess it makes sense as well. I think our lives always make sense, but maybe not so clearly until afterwards, once you sort of look back at your life and see what you've been through and what made you come to the situation you're in. I grew up in Sweden, and I also grew up in the United States. My father is from California, West Coast, United States, and my mom is from Sweden. But I spent most of my life in Sweden, in and around the city of Uppsala, which is just north of Stockholm in Sweden. And I guess to start from the beginning, I guess what's always motivated me and always has kept me going and searching is a sense of care and I guess respect for all living beings here on this planet, and also a sort of anger, I guess, at the sort of the destruction that many humans and our societies wage on the more than human world. So I think it's always been about sort of taking a stance also against things and the injustices we see all around us in different forms against other humans and against the more than human world. And I guess if I look back on my life and thinking about this, I guess we might come to talk about education a little bit more later and sort of our educational systems, and not least our universities and so forth. But I guess for me, this kind of strong sense of care for the living world has been with me since childhood, and probably comes from having spent time with my family members who also have sort of instilled this in me and spending time in those environments. And I guess I feel that looking back at my education, in some ways, my educational pathway as well, or at least has been to some extent marginalizing that sense and also stifling that sense. And in some ways, I guess, if I look back at my life, it's been about getting lost and then finding my way again. Yeah. And I think I'm still on that process in a sense. And I think that's what life is about. We make mistakes, we stumble, we get up again, and hopefully we learn something along the way. And when I was sort of most lost at one point, I was lucky enough to stumble into a context here in Uppsala, a university center that we can speak more about later, the Center for Environment and Development Studies. And that changed my direction quite a lot. And I just realized, looking back and thinking about this yesterday, that was 17 years ago. So I'm getting old, I guess, at this point. But that was sort of a turning point. And when I started, I think, finding my way against, and also starting to recover, I guess, from the trauma of our educational system, if you want to put it that way. And if I become a sort of active voice within the climate change movement and the broader movement of ecological crisis we're in, it's been because of the people and the sort of experiences I've had since having luckily stumbled into this unique and odd little center at the university here in Uppsala. So I have many people and many experiences to thank for where I have ended up today.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow. It's also remarkable how when we think about our lives, we see how much we can be grateful to so many people who have been a part of our lives and really pushed us to be the best of ourselves. So thank you so much for that. And I hope that encourages someone as well. So we're going to go into the main reason why we're here. Today, we're looking at a topic: why haven't we bent the global emissions after 3 decades, right, of research and talking and meetings and putting in strategies here and there. But this is from a paper that you wrote with a colleague, Dr. Kevin Anderson, and then many other co-authors as well. It's a paper that, when you read, you know that you need to take like a whole month to digest each section. So yeah, it took me quite a while to really go through everything. I mean, that's always good. I sort of tell people that you don't expect that you just understand someone's work that he's spent, all that time doing in just 5 minutes. Try to respect the weight of the research that someone has done. And so this is the paper that we really need at this time, because we need the voices that challenge what we've been doing and to help us to think more carefully about what we've been doing. So in your paper, 3 decades of climate mitigation, why haven't we bent the global emissions curve? Could you just walk us through, because you said something during our preparation talk, which I really liked. And could you just walk us through, how this this paper was conceived, the conception of this article, and why do you think we need such a document today?
Well, why we need such a document today, I'll let the others be a judge of that. So others that read the paper, so like yourself, I would be really curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Looking back again, I would have probably written a slightly different paper had I written it today. At the same time, I want to emphasize also that this was a very collaborative project and so forth, as that you touched upon as well. So we were 23 authors that contributed to the writing of this paper, and everybody was very active in discussions and also shaping it. And so in that sense, there were some tensions and contradictions that had to be worked out within the author groups, but also a lot of common ground that we found in writing this paper. But it is a compromise in some ways as well. Of course, trying to write a paper on controversial topics such as these with 23 academic people is not the easiest of tasks, especially when everybody comes from different disciplines and so forth.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think it's been an amazing learning process to write this paper. That's the first thing I'd like to say. And having said that, I don't know, why we need such a document today. I would still say that we tried to ask some fundamentally difficult questions that we think have been underrepresented in the sort of academic and also public debates about climate change and where we are at this point. As you said, more than 30 years after the publication of the first IPCC report and the beginning of the international negotiations and all sorts of a swathe of different kinds of climate action, we still see that emissions are more than 60% higher today than they were in 1990. And we've also emitted more fossil carbon over just these 3 decades than previously throughout history. So I think that's kind of a numerical quantitative framing of this. And of course, that has been very unequally distributed across the globe and between countries and between people as well. But we hope, I think in a sort of broader sense, I think this paper, I hope that it can contribute to a conversation and ask some difficult questions, and also helps to resituate climate change and climate change mitigation in a much broader landscape of issues, and also to perhaps challenge the idea that climate change is the problem to be fixed, and suggest that a more proper way of looking at climate change is as a symptom of an utterly unsustainable and unjust development trajectory driven by particular actors, particular mindsets, and particular ideas, and deep-seated vested interests as well. I guess this idea, we can come back to that later maybe, but this idea of also knowledge production and research being a part of that landscape, I think is something that we really try to emphasize in this, that we're not neutral observers to others' failings. We are also implicit in this as well.
Hi there, just a quick one. If you find our conversations worth listening, why don't you share them with your friends and connections? Please help us reach more and new listeners by leaving a review, commenting, or rating us on any platform where you get your podcast. We can't wait to hear your thoughts and ideas, so share them with us via a social media platform or email. Find more details in the show notes. Now let's get back into today's conversation.
I would like to know, how does one write such a paper?
Well, first of all, I would say that it's, I stumbled upon, just as I stumbled upon the university center that I mentioned earlier, I stumbled upon this opportunity as well, I would say. And the invitation to write this paper was first sent to Kevin Anderson, who you mentioned earlier as well, a close colleague of mine. And it was sent to him by one of the co-chairs of the upcoming IPCC report, Working Group 3, so the one focusing on mitigation. And Kevin's been an outspoken critic of Working Group 3 for a long time. And I guess, so the invitation was, welcome, but also Kevin realized that this would take a lot of time and effort, and he realized that his time is limited and he has many other things. But after discussing this with me, we came to the conclusion that it's a good opportunity to write something and try to really reflect back upon these issues at this moment in time. So we decided to take it on together. So that's how it started. And we then realized, we need to sort of bring this question down to the ground a bit, and also to separate it into several sub-questions and themes. And when we did that, we developed 9 different, what we call thematic lenses for this review then that we were asked to write. And quite quickly, we realized we were massively not up to the task of writing this on our own. So we invited some 20 other authors from around the world, different disciplines and different backgrounds and different experiences, also including practical experience, and not only sort of research experience, but also practical experience of participating in the international negotiations, for example. And we purposely selected those within their fields, I would say, that were critical of any sort of mainstream orthodoxy within that field, and were willing to question some of their colleagues, because we thought that that's also what's needed. So that flavors, of course, the article that we wrote. And it challenges, I hope, some of the fundamental assumptions and starting points that we've had for a long time when thinking about research and knowledge production around climate change and climate change mitigation. So these different authors that we invited, they focused on, together with another colleague that we selected also, so we put them together into pairs, more or less, focused on these different thematic entry points into this broader question. And we can go through them in a second if you'd like to hear what they were. But there was a lot of iteration and back and forth, and they wrote, they summarized what they thought were some main points within their fields that can shed some important light on this question of how we continue to emit carbon emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions over these many years, despite knowing that it's not such a good idea. And once we gotten those contributions in, we looked for some form of narrative or some form of bringing these different descriptions into a sort of a patchwork, and not a complete description of all the reasons why we failed on this, but rather creating some form of narrative around this. And it was quite hard. There was many things that came out, both sort of commonalities in the critique or in the analysis, but also differences. But one of the things that really emerged in the writing of the paper was the central role that power has played in manifest in different forms over the years, and going back long into history, but also now today as well. That's kind of a backdrop to how the paper came to be written. And I guess it was published in October last year, just before COP26 in Glasgow.
It's were you sort of aiming to have it published before COP26?
No, it wasn't. That was the journal's scheduling.
Okay.
That was the time that particular volume for the journal, which was the annual review of environment and resources. So that was when that was their publication date, a few weeks before COP. So quite timely, I guess.
Yeah, that was very good. Very timely. It's very interesting, the sort of conclusion that you come to, the central role of power or power play, which is quite interesting because it's been clear to me as well that it's always been a power play, going on over there. And I wasn't surprised, but I was just so much in agreement with the conclusion that you made, which is not something I was expecting. It wasn't something I was expecting. The way it just came out, I felt, well, you really did justice to that. And you spoke of some of the differences that the co-authors, were having during the drafting of the paper. Do you find any of them so significant that you could share with us?
Having said that, I would say that it's surprising that the lack of disagreement on some fundamental questions.
Okay.
I would say so. That's sort of what stood out more than the. So it was more on the detailed levels in terms of different.
All right.
Let's say questions and so forth. But I guess one should say also that there was, when you write a paper with 22 other people, whoever you are in that process, you have to have some willingness to accept that what is written will not completely mirror your own understanding of the problems, and there will be important things that will be missed out and so forth.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the case. Especially, I think there was some discussion when we were in the process of creating these different groupings of the different lenses into different sort of trying to bring out some form of narrative. That's when it becomes, because always when you create a narrative out of something as messy as this process has been and sort of different entry points, that kind of is brought to the fore and emphasized.
Yeah.
And of course, we could have emphasized other things as well than the ones that we focused on. But so I think there were some critical discussions around that process. But overall, yeah, I would say that I'm surprised but I think it's because we had that iterative process and where we also tried to select people that might have different entry points also within each thematic area. There were people that had different perspectives. So there was a sort of internal peer review, I guess you could say, between the authors of each section, and then of course. But I don't want to sort of emphasize any of the particular.
I understand.
There's disagreements because there's nothing that really comes to mind now. Actually, that was fundamentally at odds with each other. So
wow. I'll probably say this is off the records, but one of the things I thought of when I saw the paper and read the paper and with the title was, I wonder how the review process went. How was the review process for such a paper?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm rather new to the academic publishing world. I should have perhaps said that in the beginning of introducing myself. I'm a PhD candidate at the moment at the University of Uppsala in the Department of Earth Sciences in an interdisciplinary research group on natural resources and sustainable development. And I've been within the academic world for a long time, but not in the capacity of a PhD candidate or engaged in writing academic publications. So for me, that whole world is rather new to me. Okay. So what I say is based on my very limited experience, but I think the first paper that I published as a part of my PhD studies went through quite a rigorous peer review process where we really had to, work through a lot of the comments that came in, and it took a long time. And the review process for this article also took some time. I also realized that in the writing of this paper, that there are also limits of critique. And there's a risk sometimes when you critique something and when you say that this is the problem and these are the power structures that we need to change, that you actually risk lending support to them and strengthening them by critiquing them. So that's sort of where I think it's important to critique them, but I think it's also then important to step back and think about, well, how can things be done differently then? To not get stuck in sort of just pointing fingers and saying this is what's wrong with the world, but actually, living and doing things in ways that then go in a different direction.
Yeah, that's that was a very good conclusion. I because I'm asking this question because we are sort of also, I told you we are working on a temperature CO2 paper, and that is of course also it's a very controversial topic, and you have people on both sides, and we are looking at it from a very physical perspective, and it's I've been literally writing the paper for a year now, because the co-authors are just trying to make sure that we try to stay in the gray area, at least in maybe 50% of the paper, and then the other 50% we try to, in a very subtle way, make our point over there, because there are going to be a lot of questions, and this is sort of the first time that the topic is being discussed from this perspective, and so it's been quite interesting, and we even decided also to pull in more co-authors to help boost the at least first to help critique ourselves before we put something like that out there for others to also critique. So I look forward to my review process as well. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Green Living Chat podcast, where we looked at how this unique paper by Isak Stoddard and co-authors came into fruition. And we hope that you have learned a lot throughout the discussions that we've had here. In the next episode, we'll be discussing the content of the paper and look at the different themes that were discussed under the whole topic of the global emissions, and why we haven't been able to bend the curve after 3 decades of research and continual studies and discussions globally. Stay tuned for that and don't miss it.